On the 7th of December 2002, a thief broke into the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam and got away with 2 Van Gogh paintings in just 3 minutes, worth a combined $100 million. Nobody could have guessed those 2 priceless paintings would vanish without a trace for the next 14 years, turning into one of the most legendary unsolved cases in art crime history. The man behind this perfect heist was Octave Durham, a career criminal who'd spent years running around Amsterdam's West Side. He came from an ordinary family, but fell in with the wrong crowd, working his way up from stealing bikes and breaking into cars to stealing electronics and eventually bank robbery. Durham had been arrested multiple times, but always for minor stuff, nothing serious enough to land him real prison time. Having spent years operating in the gray zone, he was sharp, calculating, and fearless, and an ambitious plan to steal a masterpiece was already taking shape in his head. His motivation traced back to a case that shook Europe in 1990. A hardened Dutch criminal named Koerhaus had once stolen 3 Van Gogh paintings, but instead of selling them, he used them as bargaining chips, trading them to prosecutors after his arrest in exchange for a reduced sentence and his freedom. That story stuck with Durham. He understood that a masterpiece like that couldn't be sold openly, but it was the ultimate insurance policy for a criminal on the run. If things ever went south, one painting could buy him a way out. That was the whole reason he was determined to steal a Van Gogh. To get past the museum's tight security, Durham spent months preparing. He posed as a tourist, scouted the location repeatedly, and mapped out camera blind spots, patrol schedules, and weak points in the building structure. Eventually, he zeroed in on a window with weak glass in a corner of the building, the only viable way in. A week before the heist, he did one final run-through of the entire plan and confirmed there were no holes in it. He then brought in an accomplice named Henk, and the 2 of them planned to climb up to the roof from the back courtyard using a ladder, then break through the window into the gallery. To get their ladder, they stole one from a nearby school in the middle of the night. Moving it in the dark without drawing attention took them 3 hours to sneak it around to the back of the museum. Just as they were about to make their move, something went wrong. A cleaning staff member was still inside, working late. She had her back to the window and had no idea anyone was out there. If she'd turned around, the whole plan would have fallen apart. Not willing to lose their window of opportunity, the 2 men decided to risk it, timing their move to her blind spot and quickly getting the ladder up to the roof. It went off without a hitch. Durham knew that the moment the glass broke, the alarm would trigger, and police would arrive within 3 minutes. His window to work was razor thin, so instead of breaking the glass right away, he set up his escape route first, rigging an emergency rope at the front entrance of the museum to guarantee a fast getaway once they had the paintings. With his exit secured, he smashed the window and climbed inside. His original target was sunflowers, but that piece was under such heavy security, watched around the clock, that it was completely out of reach. He switched targets to the potato eaters, but that canvas was too large to fit through the window. Time was running out, and the risk kept climbing. Under pressure, he quickly grabbed 2 smaller, easier to carry Van Gogh paintings, stuffed them into his backpack, and got out. By then, police had already reached the back courtyard and were watching the ladder closely. Durham used that gap in their coverage to rappel down the front entrance rope and escape, where a getaway car was already waiting. But during the escape, he accidentally dropped a hat, a tiny piece of evidence that would later become the key to cracking the case. The 2 men drove off, monitoring police radio the entire time to track the citywide manhunt in real time. What nobody expected was that Durham didn't skip town. Instead, he drove straight back to his own apartment and hid the 2 paintings, worth well over $100 million combined, inside a hidden compartment near the entryway. The next day, the Van Gogh theft made headlines around the world. The 2 stolen paintings were View of the Sea at Scheveningen and Congregation Leaving the Reformed Church in Nieuwennen, together worth nearly $100 million. What looked like the perfect crime still had a crack in it. Police found the hat Durham had dropped at the scene, and a DNA match led them straight to their suspect. Even with the evidence pointing at Durham, Dutch legal procedure was strict. DNA alone wasn't enough to get a search or arrest warrant. Without a complete chain of evidence, police had no legal right to search his home. The stolen paintings were sitting inside Durham's apartment the entire time, and police knew the truth but had no choice but to wait, watching a suspect walk free right in front of them. Fully aware of how risky it was to keep the paintings, Durham started dealing with the evidence right away. He removed the heavy frames to make the paintings easier to hide, and in the process accidentally chipped off a tiny piece of paint. In a panic, he did something absurd. He flushed the paint fragments down the toilet, making him, as far as anyone knows, the only person in history to have destroyed a piece of an actual Van Gogh. He tossed the remaining frames into a canal that same night, wiping out every trace. Within just 18 hours of the theft, every piece of physical evidence was gone. Durham started looking for a black market buyer, but the buyer he'd already lined up suddenly went dark. Out of options, he reached out to Courthouse, the very criminal who'd inspired him in the first place, and the two arranged a secret deal. But right before the deal could go through, Courthouse was assassinated, cutting off Durham's only channel to sell the paintings. The black market for stolen art is a minefield. Organizations dedicated to recovering stolen artifacts operate worldwide, often posing as wealthy buyers to run sting operations. Statistics show tens of thousands of pieces of art get stolen globally every year, and only about 10% are ever recovered. Most end up hidden away, sold off, or destroyed by criminal organizations. With nowhere else to turn, and under mounting pressure, Durham was introduced to a mafia middleman who went by the nickname Pinocchio. This man had connections to Italy's Camorra crime syndicate and access to an established underground trading network. Out of options, Durham finally agreed to sell the paintings at a steep discount. Just as the deal was about to close, police had finally assembled a complete case and raided Durham's apartment overnight. Having anticipated this moment for years, Durham barricaded the door with a washing machine and furniture, buying himself time. Hearing officers trying to break in, he skipped the idea of jumping and instead climbed out onto the balcony, scaled his way across a row of connected apartment rooftops, and broke through the police perimeter entirely, fleeing Holland that same night, all the way to Barcelona, Spain. While on the run, Durham reached out to a fellow countryman and, unexpectedly, ended up taken in by Barcelona football legend Patrick Kluivert. As one of the top stars in soccer at the time, Kluivert reportedly knew Durham was a wanted fugitive and still hid him in his own private villa. Kluivert later denied the whole thing entirely, and the story remains disputed to this day. Not long after, Durham was arrested in Barcelona and extradited home to face sentencing. Police had finally caught their thief, but the stolen paintings were still nowhere to be found. Durham admitted he'd sold the paintings to the Italian mafia, but organized crime groups are notoriously tight-lipped and hard to track, and the international investigation stalled out. The painting's location remained a mystery. 14 years went by, and then in 2016, the case finally cracked wide open. Italian prosecutors received an anonymous letter containing a handwritten confession from a mafia boss named Raffaele Imperiale. Known by the nickname Pinocchio, this crime boss had made his fortune in drug trafficking and was living in Dubai to avoid prosecution. He admitted that back in 2002, he'd paid Durham €5 million for the two Van Gogh paintings. His confession wasn't a change of heart, though. He was exploiting a loophole in Italian law that grants major sentence reductions to criminals who voluntarily turn over stolen goods and cooperate with investigators. To boost his own bargaining power, he deliberately inflated the sale price and exaggerated the value of the artwork. Following the leads in his confession, police immediately searched the mafia boss's private villa. Tucked away in a corner of the kitchen, wrapped in layers of cloth, they found the two Van Gogh paintings that had been hidden for over a decade. After being smuggled across borders and stashed away by the mob, both masterpieces turned out to be completely undamaged and finally made their way back to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam. After 14 years on the run, these national treasures had finally come home. This heist, pulled off in just 3 minutes, spanned 3 countries, the Netherlands, Spain, and Italy, and pulled in organized crime, a sports star's alleged cover-up, and black market dealing, cementing its place as one of the most legendary cases in the history of art crime.